Kum Lenin Ablat Gemara. Today's daf that Pei Beis is the first blot for the year of Tufshin Pei Gimel. First day Rosh Hashanah. We are up to the two dots. Okay, we're talking about a Shemeres Yavam who's the husband's rights in the field are a little bit less than the case of a Arusa, and we're trying to work things out. So who Gavra, there was a person, the Nafle Yavama. And the last thing we learned was a little story about a guy that wanted to marry his Yavama, and his younger brother wanted to give a get to the Yavama so nobody can marry her, so that they can all divide the deceased brother's estate. So the older brother promised him, no, let me marry Reuven's wife, and we will divide the estate out between ourselves. Turned out to be that he had no right to sell. According to Rabbi Yosef, he had no right to sell, or he had no rights really in that property. So whatever he promised was meaningless, and he doesn't have to abide by it, even though he promised it. That's what we learned in the previous year. Abai disagree, but that's what Rabbi Yosef said. So now the Gemara says, "Hu Gavra," a similar story that happened, I guess, a little bit later on. And this person was aware of the first story. So Hu Gavra was a person. The Nafle Yavama that were that Pei Beis about 8 lines at the top of the 2 dots. So there was a person, the Nafle Yavama, the Muslim Mechasya in the city of Mechasya. He had his brother passed away, and therefore he had to marry his sister-in-law. Boya Achvul Mishul Megita. The same thing happened and repeated itself. A younger brother who was not really entitled to marry her, but he wanted a share in Reuven's estate, so he was going to give a get to Reuven's wife, the widow, so that no longer anyone can marry her, and then they'll divide the estate equally. Amalei, so the older brother said, "My dad, what's your intent? You're worried about the estate. And I will divide the estate between us two." Amalei, so the brother said, "Hey, you think you're going to trick me like, okay, Mr. Fina? I am worried that volatility you'll do to me, like Pumpadisa, the liar did." Now, what happened to the liar was a question of halacha, whether he did the right thing or not. No, what happened was that if he would have still given his brother half the estate, he's allowed to do whatever he wants. But what happened was he then turned around and said, "I'm not giving you anything." So they went to the Din Torah, and the Din Torah was for Rabbi Yosef, and that's what he passed. He says, so therefore the guy was a trickster. He was just conning him. You're going to do the same thing to me? I don't trust you. Amalei, he said, "I'll tell you better. You know what? Let's not wait till later. Let's divide it right now. And it won't take effect until I marry her. But let's split it right now. So this way you're protected. I can't change my mind." He says, "Come to the son of Ashi." He said, even though when Abdimi came from Israel, Amar Rabbi Yechi said, "Name Rabbi Yechi. If somebody says to his friend, go ahead and do the transaction now. Go ahead and schlep this cow right now. But I don't want it to be yours yet because I still want it for myself. But I'm going to be somewhere else in 30 days. So in 30 days time, I don't need it anymore. You can have it, but you won't be near the cow. But the Mashiach, the Kinyan you did right now, the transaction right now should become effective in 30 days. And then he goes further. I feel even though it might be some swamp somewhere, so that he's not even near it, doesn't matter. The kinyan is effective. So you would say maybe the same thing here. He said, "I'm giving you the property now, even though it's not going to be valid right now. But when I get married, it'll become effective." Says the Gemara, "No, it won't work here. It's different in that case. There, you know why? Hassan biyadi over there. If he wanted to give him right now the cow and say make a transaction right now, make him a shich, it would have been effective right now. But he said, look, do the kinyan now. It won't take effect for 30 days. Fine. But over here." Right now, if the brother-in-law who's going to marry the woman says, "I'm giving it to you right now, take it," it's ineffective because the brother has no right to it yet. So it doesn't own it yet outright, so he can't give it away. So therefore, since the kinyan right now is not valid, how can you make the kinyan now and say it should be valid later on? It doesn't work. Here it's totally not in his capability to do that. So the Gemara, when Rabbi came along, Rabbi came along. In other words, even though after he became a Yavam, after he married this woman, then it would become effective. He shouldn't sell the properties. But if it did, Masha Asli, what he did is what he did. But over here, you did it at a time when you weren't married to her yet. So therefore, right now, you had no right to do this. You didn't have any rights yet. Says the Gemara, what are you talking about? Rav came along to Rabbi Yechon, like Kani. In fact, I have a problem. Even in the case of a parah, it says clearly that if it says in 30 days take effect, do the transaction now, it does not work. Like Kasha. No, it's not a question. If he says make the kinyan now, and in 30 days it'll become activated, become effective retrospectively or retroactively. So therefore it works. If he didn't say it should take effect now, you're making a kinyan now, but it's not yours. In 30 days it becomes yours. Where's the kinyan? Then it doesn't work. But if you say ma'achshav, then it takes effect and it works right now. That's so. Okay, so more traces and others trying to talk about how come if you learn more kedushin, if a man gives a woman money and he says, "Here's money for kedushin, but I don't want to take effect for another 30 days," and it comes to 30 days, and there's no money. She used up all the money. She's still engaged to him. Why is she engaged to him? There's nothing, and he didn't say the word ma'achshav. He didn't say, "Here, take the money right now." And in 30 days from now, if nobody else, if you don't change your mind and nobody else comes forward and approaches you, then it should be a valid kedushin. He didn't say ma'achshav. He just said it was valid kedushin. And what had to come through day number 30, so it should take effect then, but there's no money left. Yet she's mekudesh. What's the difference? So we explain, if she is not mekudesh, she then owes him the $100 that he gave her, because the only reason I gave it to you is for kedushin. If you're not going to be mekudesh, you owe me money. So it's as if the money is still in existence, because the money is a noose around her neck, that this money she has to pay it back. So as if the money is still in existence, and that's why at the end of 30 days, even though the money is no longer here, but the chayv of the money is here, so therefore she will be mekudesh. Okay, so you want to further. They asked Ula a few questions. What about Yibem, the Achakar Chilik? What happens? He married her, and then we said before that all the assets are encumbered for the Ksuvah, but he decided to sell it. What happens then? Is it effective or not? He said, he paskin that it's not effective, he cannot sell it. But whatever he did is no good. Like we had the argument for Rabbi Yishmael Abai. What happens if he first distributed it and then he divided the asset and then he married her? Is that effective or not? It's not effective. Actually, it doesn't even make sense. If once we're told that even if you married her, you have no right to sell the properties, you're going to tell me that before you married her, he has no right to sell the properties. Of course, he has no right to sell the properties. What's the point of that? Says the Gemara, he married her and still he gave out the properties. Useless. You have to tell me if he first distributed properties and then he married her, that it's ineffective. So Gemara says, you're right. Who you think that these questions were said together at the same time, and then you wonder why you ask question number 2 when already question number 1 was resolved. Shnei ma'asim, 2 separate incidents, and they didn't happen at the same time, and neither of them heard of the other person. And therefore, that's why it's all right to have these 2 kinds of questions, because they were totally separate, asked in separate situations, and it's not one following the other. Says the Gemara, ki also Ravi came along by Shlakish, bein yibe v'argachile, bein chile v'argachile l'asla klum. Doesn't matter. V'yichas l'asla klum. The halacha tak is, loy asa the loy klum. Nothing really happened. Not like Rabbi Yosef and like Abaya. Abaya said Taki shouldn't do it, but if he did it, you did it. It's all right. Here he says no. That halacha is like Rabbi Yosef, loy asa the loy klum. Telling about it further, it says in our Mishnah, the Chachamim say, we had a machlekes, it seems Rav Meir, and the Chachamim, so we said, according to Rav Meir, what do you call it? Let's say everything that's attached to the land that she brings in is, the person who passed away left behind land, fields, and there was I guess, crop ready to be harvested. So Rav Meir says that this crop is also considered part of the land. And if you work out to calculate the value of the crop, because you calculate the value of the land without the crop and with the crop, and the difference is he has to pay her, and then you get that money, you buy more land, more fields, and he gets to keep the dividends. And the Chachamim then, and when it comes to what do you call it? Payers that are already detached from the ground, we said that's metalton. According to the May, it's also encumbered to the Kesuvos. So you take that those payers, you sell with the money by fields, and then he gets the dividends. The Chachamim came along and said that the payers that are attached to the ground belongs to him. Now the question is, why does it belong to him? If this is Reuven's assets, and all Reuven's assets are encumbered to the Kesuvos. So what do you mean he belongs to him as if he can do whatever he wants? It's still part of the assets of the property. Asamai, why? Everything's encumbered, including since the fruits are still attached to the tree, or the grains are still attached to the ground, they're part of the assets. Because you're right. Tanisha law, Med edit the Mishnah say it's her, not his. Kansa, but once he marries her, it's like his wife. In what way? What do you mean when he says like his wife? In what respect? Omar, let me tell you, Shemigarsha beget that he could, first of all, he can divorce her. Now that they're married, no longer need chalitzik, just divorce her, number one. And number two is umachzida, if like any other Yisro, if he a while later they decide to get remarried, he can. So you want to analyze each of these two cases. Why not? Of course, every woman that you marry, you give a divorce. Nay. I would have thought, because the pasuk says the yibma, that we there's a mitzvah for the brother to marry her, and we call it the yibma, you marry her as a yibama. So Amar Achmana, the Torah says. So we would have thought, it says the pasuk, you should take her as a wife. The yibma. What does this extra word, the yibma, mean? I would have thought that even after he marries her, she's still considered a yibama. And therefore, maybe you can't just give a get. You want to divorce her, you have to give her a chalitza as well, because she's still considered a yevama. Like he's giving her a get, a chalitza. I would have thought get is insufficient. You need a chalitza. Come comes to teach you that no, a get, it's a wife, it's a wife, and therefore you can issue a divorce. Machzira, the next thing you said was that he could take her back if he divorced her. Pshita, why not? Like any other wife. No. Ma'atem, I would have thought that the only excuse that he had to marry her was because there's a mitzvah of Gama. But now that you married her and you divorced, now you just take her back as a wife. Since she is your sister-in-law, maybe the isser of your husband, of your brother's wife, comes right back into force. Ma'atem, I would have thought mitzvah of the he fulfilled his mitzvah. Now should be the isser of your brother's wife. Come to tell you not so. Says the Gemara, how do you talk? Maybe talking not allowed to marry her again. You just assume you can. Maybe you can't. Maybe she's still considered your brother's wife. And the first time around you did a mitzvah, and now since you already fulfilled your mitzvah, you can no longer take her back. On Makro, it says a pasuk, leisha, take her as a wife. What does it try to mean? It says take her as a wife. Once you marry her, it's as if she's completely your wife. Says the Gemara. But you should know that he doesn't write her a brand new ksuva. The ksuva that she had between herself and her deceased husband is the ksuva that's now continued into the next marriage, because the yavam steps into the shoes of the brother who's deceased. Says the Gemara, my time, why should he have to give a ksuva? Every woman has to give a ksuva. Why this one doesn't he have to issue his own ksuva? Because in all cases, you decided to marry this woman, so therefore you have to give her a ksuba. Here, the Eibishter made you marry this woman, so mitzvah of Yibum. So therefore, you don't have to write your own ksuba. Now, so whose ksuba is it? The first husband, and therefore all the assets of the first husband are encumbered. However, the Gemara came along. Midrabanan came along and said, let's say Reuben has no assets, then Islam Mishayni. Then we force the Yavam to issue her a ksuba. Today, Shalai to Hekala, the end of let's say. We don't want it to be easy for him just to throw. Every time he gets angry, he throws her out. Ksuba is there to arrest that anger, to temper that anger, because you reconsider. If you divorce her, you have to pay her out. So therefore, to reconsider that, we tell him, in this case, give her a ksuba. Says he went further, the Yemalite ksuba say, he shouldn't say, here is a ksuba on the table. And then we say the same thing applies to his wife. The same thing applies to his wife. What do you mean the same thing applies to his wife? Says the Gemara, what do you mean the same to his wife? What are you trying to add over there? Says the Gemara, over there, when it comes to Ruvain's ksuba, your husband, the late husband's ksuba, the new husband, the Yavam, doesn't write his own ksuba, so he doesn't write any future purchases that I buy. So she has no trust on him. It's all to do with Reuben's assets, and therefore, if he just says, "Here's the asset that's going to protect you, and everything else I'm going to sell," she's worried. What happens? You sell all the other assets, and what happens? This particular asset deteriorates, or the money that you put on the table gets lost or something. So therefore, she's not trusting, and that's why you can't do that. But in a normal case of a husband and wife, over there, Inix will be right. Anything I buy in the future. So therefore, she's not worried if you want to sell everything right now, because it'll be surely you'll buy things in the future. So she'll always have some comfort in that fact that she'll be able to in the future have some security. She's reliant. You sell now, I'm not worried. Leave the money here, because you'll buy more things in the future. I'm sure I'll have somewhere to collect my ksuva from. Kamashalon, that it doesn't work that way. That she's still insecure, and therefore you cannot say this money is incumbent for you. So that's it. Second one further. Gersha in it says in the pasuk, it says in the Mishnah that if he divorced, it says in the Mishnah about if he divorced, he collected ksuva and so on. It says over there, if once he divorces her, then all he has to do is pay her out the value of the ksuva, and that's it. So what's the Mishnah trying to tell you? And you would think, well, you pay more than the ksuva. Says the Gemara, you know what it means? Gersha in lo ksuva. If he divorced her, all she gets is the value of a ksuva. Gersha in lo gersha. If he didn't divorce her, he doesn't. What do you mean? This teacher of Rababa said, if you want to be able to sell the rest of the property, especially in the case of Yibum, what you do is you first divorce her, pay her out the ksuva, sell all the other fields, and then you take it back. It's not a problem because when you sold all the fields, she already got her ksuva paid out. Or you just take her back in again and you write her a new ksuva, and because you write her a new ksuva, it's no longer like a Yibum, it's like any other wife that if you sold the fields, you sold the fields. Says you take it back, it's like any other woman, that's all she has the ksuva. What's he trying to tell you over here? What's he trying to teach you? By Yavama. Tanina, we're learning regarding we're learning like this. We learned already. Somebody divorces his wife, takes it back. You're telling me that by Yavama, if he takes it back, it's a continuation of the first ksuva. Every wife is that way. Every wife, you take it back. Let's say you divorce your wife, and then you didn't pay her out ksuva yet, and then she comes back. It's a continuation of the first ksuva. You don't have to pay her 2 ksuvas. So what's the difference of Yavama or your wife? No, Maudi, I would have thought Ishtai, who only by your wife, EU Kosla ksuva minei, by your wife, since he wrote the first ksuva as well to her. So therefore, if he takes it back, it's the same ksuva. You don't have to write another one. But it comes to Yavama, we say that it's the first ksuva from the first husband. That's active. So if he divorces and takes it back, maybe he has to write her a brand new ksuva between him and her. Hey, I would have thought that maybe now you have to write a brand new ksuva between him and her. You don't have to. That he can take the first ksuva between her deceased husband and herself and activate that again, and you rely on that. Abuda said, but it's showing in the beginning, they write to ksula, beside him $200, they wrote $100. And what happened? Well, that's the whole ksuva. They didn't in any way encumber any of the assets of the ksuva. They just wrote a piece of paper, a document. I owe you if this marriage dissolves, I'll pay you $200 for a psula or $100 for a month. So you know what happened was that the women decide, you know what, we'll remain single. We're not going to get married because you'll just play around with us. We don't trust you. You're going to hide things like that. Came along Shim Meshatach. Tikin kol nechasav achrein. He made a special takana that all your assets should be encumbered to the ksuva or a lien on it for the ksuva. So therefore, women felt more confident. Tanya Namochin, if Raisa actually learned a bit more, but he's showing in the beginning. Look how it evolved. The right psula must sign $200. Almana $100. But Maskini and the women that refused to get married, they were getting old. They remained spinsters. And the men couldn't get married to any women. Nobody wanted to marry them. She'll say, if he divorces me or if he dies, there won't be any assets left because he used them all up for whatever. And the Yoshim will turn all the cash and they'll hide the cash. They'll have nothing. Made a special takana that'll buy something equal to the value of the ksuva and place it in her house, so she's secure. She knows that if the marriage dissolves, she knows where to get the ksuva from. But dying, nevertheless, if you ever get angry, he would say to her, because once he paid it out, he no longer has to worry about it. It's as if the money's no longer his. He doesn't feel any more the pain of paying anything out. And every time I get angry, at a whim, he would say, go to your father's house, there's a ksuva, and leave me alone. He's kinu, so they decided because we want to make sure the marriages last and people don't just get angry in a fit and dissolve the whole marriage. So they made the next institution was they will place it in the house of her in-laws, the house of her husband, And they gave it to her to use straight away. For example, Ashidas, the rich ones who had large ksuvas, these baskets out of silver and out of gold. Remember, we learned before they had these baskets that was like a shekel, a basket that went around the head and then under the chin, and then on top of it was a flat surface with some rim, with a rim around it, so they can place things and walk around. So they bought a golden basket, which was obviously quite expensive, and she was able to use it. So she already has a ksuva in her hand, totally in her hand. And for the poor people, they made a utensil for urine. Obviously, it's much cheaper. But I'm sure it's quite embarrassing to walk around with those things. But anyway, Rashi actually doesn't have the words meime raglaim. It just has ovid, a much cheaper basket. And Rashi adds, however, the words meime raglaim. So maybe the basket means other things. But what happened was, because he gave it to her, and even though she already has it, he didn't feel the cost, the pain of paying her out. So again, every time there was a whim, he would just send her away. Every time he got angry, he said, "No, take it, I'll give you a get and go." The tikkun, he made a rule. He would say to her, "All my assets are achroyim to your ksuva," and not just metaltin that he gave her on the side, but all my properties, everything else. And then she felt more secure. Because initially, because it's talking about money or metaltlin, she was scared that he would take all the assets, turn it into money, and then the money, the children would hide. Very easy to hide it. And giving it to putting in her father's house in metaltlin, or even she alone having it, it didn't really help her, because once she had it, it doesn't cost him anything to send her away. So therefore, made the takana that it has to be all the assets. In this way, he'll think twice before he decides to dissolve the marriage. Hadna Lacha Isha, we are up to the 9th Perek. We'll continue with Shematzoi Rosh Hashanah. I think it's also about 7:45. And everyone should have a Shana Teva Masuka, a good Menshior, a Kesuvos Daf, and a good year.